Let's start with the general spirituality that seemed to be a part of this.
The general spirituality of the... I don't think there's any question that there was a very powerful, undeniable movement of... I don't like the word spiritual because it's misused. It's such a precious word, and it's being dragged in the mud by so many people for their own profit that I use it with great tenderness. But I think we can say that millions of people had an awakening, an enlightenment, a revelation of inner potential, or of inner divinity, or some deep, life-changing experience that has always been listed as mystical or as spiritual. There's no question of it. You can't quantify or play the game of numbers, but I think it's possible that more people had this experience in maybe 10 years than ever before in human history. And of course, those who have studied this elusive and centrally vital issue know that one experience does not a lifetime of sainthood make, and that everyone goes on from a moment of illumination, change, but coming to individual terms with it. But yes, there was definitely and there was no question that psychedelic substances, drugs, and plants had a large factor in that, which is no surprise because the history of shamanism shows this, that thousands of years, tribes who have been lucky enough geographically or temperature-wise to be in places where powerful sacramental botanicals are grown have had these experiences.
You mentioned a momentary spiritual experience. That's something that interests me. A momentary spiritual experience as opposed to something that can be sustained. And I think some more traditional religions would be critical of the spiritual experiences that, say, come from psychedelics, because they say that's a momentary experience, whereas some prolonged discipline, in India it's called sadhana.
I understand. Now, I would say exactly the opposite. I'm exactly critical of anyone who attempts to impose the word traditional on something that is so precious, so individualistic, so alive, yes, to come along and try to organize it, and to form monasteries and ashrams and schools of thought and write books about, stamping your version of it, or your imprint, as we would say neurologically. Yes, just as they would be definitely opposed to what I'm saying of the fragility and the brain is set up such a way, not that any of us know much about it, but that one flash and you get a picture, and that picture's there, and now what you do with it, or how you put it on your wall, or you forget about it, or tear it up, or you know, it's the very evanescence that all is one. In 1 minute, in one flash, in one blinding illumination, I saw everything. All is one. Boom, boom, boom.
Something leads you to that experience.
Well, some people it's been a hit in the head.
Right.
Yeah.
A flash of inspiration.
Yeah, or people with drowning, the confrontation suddenly when your brain or your soul is going close to the possibility that something might be over, then suddenly they start flashing all sorts of memories. Yes, so that there are many, many, many ways of achieving this experience. At Harvard, for several years, many of us, 30 or 40 of us, working together there, with people spread all around the world, including many Oriental sages and swamis and teachers who were kind enough to come by and visit us and teach us. And one of the interesting criteria of the mystical God experience is that it's ineffable. Oh, it's ineffable, it's ineffable. Now what that means is you can't talk about it in English words. you can't write a dissertation about it, or you can't take a measurement like temperature. Oh yes, mine was 96.8 and yours was 102. The ineffability is almost, it's almost one of those Zen rules, like the Tao thing. If you can talk about it, it ain't the Tao. And I have also always been a very deeply, passionately devoted Taoist. I wrote a book called the Prayers from the Tao Te Ching, sutras and essays and poems, almost the Japanese might say haikus about the Taoist.
When they say that you can't, if you talk about it, it's not the Tao, that's also talking about it, and that's telling you something about the Tao. So I think what they mean is that you ultimately can't speak about exactly what it is. It's ineffable in that sense, but to some degree you can certainly give some indication of what it is with words.
Of course, there's something else that runs through the Tao, and I think that runs through the highest forms of spirituality, and that is a sense of humor. And anytime anyone starts getting solemn and sacred and this and that, and or logical or like that, you know, you lost it. And certainly, when the Tao says if you talk about it, it's not the Tao, that they're talking about it. But that's always said with mirrors within mirrors. You can tell by looking at the smile in the person's eyes. I can see your eyes smiling now that you're not going to be tying me up to a cross or beat me if I don't agree with you. And it's that sense of humor. Alan Watts, the Buddhist, was English Buddhist author, was wonderful about that, keeping the sense of play, or nothing Hindus call the Maya. And don't grab onto it and think you got it and it belongs to me.
Sanskrit's Leela.
Leela, exactly. Leela, that's right. Leela and or Maya, that's right. Yeah. But Maya is illusion.
Maya means illusion.
No, the wrong word. Sorry, you corrected me. Yes, you're right. Maya and Leela.
Well, they're very much related because you like that. You like that.
We've been sleeping together for years. Don't be quoting up me on that.
We have to go from here.
Well, we're going to go to lunch. I made the obligatory trip to India and spent about a year there, and then I met, as I said before, we were lucky enough to have many scholars and students of Eastern religions come to our places at Harvard.
What year was
and
this?
At Millbrook to teach us. We were at Harvard from 60 to 63. When we were at Millbrook from 63 to 68. And as I say, I went to India and a couple of times. So I can't keep all the names straight. Also, I know that I've been to Allen Ginsberg's Buddhist stuff, and I studied 6 months in the foothills of the Himalayas with Lama Govinda.
We met Prabhupada. Do you remember any of the interaction?
Well, I remember him to be just very pure. You remember blue sky? Yeah, it was pretty cloudless. Yeah, there was no personal or eccentricities that struck out. He just seemed to be right there all the time. Very obviously very profound. It's of interest to me that many of the words they use to define the soul are very similar to words you would use to describe the brain. That is a seat of consciousness. And I love to take words, and partly because I'm Irish, and twist them around to make you see words differently. And so I've written a book called the Manual on the Operation and Preservation of the Soul. Now, they see the very idea that you can operate a soul to a Catholic. Oh, God! The soul is given to you, clicked by God when He stamps you out, and He takes it back. But the notion of operating a soul is a kind of an American street way of saying what most Hindu or Asian disciplines would say. You learn how to the discipline practice of illumination, which would be like operating a soul, or preserving it and feeding it, or exercising it and letting it out to run around. So I associate the soul with the brain, this it's not that the soul is the brain, but clearly the soul hangs around the brain, or that's the residence of the brain, or
Mhm.
you know, that soul.
Through the
Do you
brain?
think there's anything that survives the annihilation of the body?
Well, there are many, many answers to that question. I would say obviously yes. Any work of art that you could create and leave your soul, certainly would say, you know, that
So beyond what we create, do you think,
Beethoven's soul has been preserved in his symphonies, or what? Beyond what?
beyond what you can create, when you leave this world, shuffle off the mortal coil, do you think there's any part of Tim Leary that will actually, will you continue, or is you die? Is there such a thing as death? Is really the question.
Well, you're implying there that there's some passive thing that when I said what I create, I leave, you're saying, well, we don't count that. Oh, that's shit, that. But there's some Beethoven there that's beyond the Ninth Symphony. You know what? I understand very clearly what you're doing.
I mean, I wouldn't like to think that you're going to die. I'd like to think that you will actually go to another level.
Well, I have. I've probably written as much about that as anyone in the room. Maybe you're exception. But I belong to a group, Alcor, this bracelet. Do you know what that means?
No.
It means that my body, my brain is certainly going to be, and possibly my body will be frozen. When we don't use the word die, we say deanimate. There are over 260 Americans, not Americans, only there's...
Is Walt Disney one of them?
Disney's one of them, Andy Warhol's one of them.
After I went as far as I could with acid, I went into organized meditation, and I think...
Organized meditation sounds like an oxymoron to me. It's like organized religion. How can you have organized meditation? Lockstep Nazi Buddhists going around. I pay deep respect, although I joked for a minute. I honor that question very much, because I think that that anything precious and important you do in life should be done with somebody else. And for the lone person to be up there in the mountaintop having realization, that's like, to excuse the expression, spiritual masturbation. I mean, yeah. That the human being, the human brain, as a matter of fact, turns out now, quantum physics tells us everything is fields, and there's no one electron. Electron has that other electrons to bounce off of. Einstein says there's no absolute law of motion or space, and that's got to be in relationship to something else. So, yes, I honor the notion of groups, a small group. I think that when the groups get too large, that there's not that person-to-person thing, then you get the big ashrams, and you get the Catholic churches, and you get...
It gets impersonalistic.
And then you get the hierarchies and so forth, and I think that's... some people like it, it's okay, but no, but yes, I think it's anything spiritual is best done in small groups.